Hello, everyone. This is episode 4 of Here Comes the Pitch, a podcast about pitching story ideas. Today's guest, Russ Kazmierczak, will be pitching a dark comedy called Fallapart. I would compare this story to the movie The Fugitive and the Tales From The Crypt episode Lower Berth. I'm your host, Derk Harron, and without further ado, here comes the pitch. Well, Russ.
Derk, it's been some time. How have you been?
Thanks for being on the show again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I know that this past weekend was big for you with Ace Comic-Con.
Yeah, it was a great weekend, and I never went into that show. I didn't go into the convention at all. Everything I experienced was peripheral to the Comic-Con. As you know, I podcast with Ken Brown, the co-owner of Drawn to Comics in downtown Glendale.
Right.
We do a podcast creatively called the Drawn to Comics Podcast, and he was invited by the mayor of Glendale to a press conference the day he and I were scheduled to record an episode. So he said, hey, you want to just tag along and take some pictures, and I'll put them on the website and in the social media and stuff. And I said, sure. So I was Ken's podcast partner along for the ride to this press conference, which turned out to be the mayor of Glendale essentially giving a certificate or a proclamation to Stan Lee.
Did he know that Stan Lee was going to be there? Or?
We did not know what the nature of we didn't know where we would fall into the organization or structure of this press conference, but yeah, we learned that it was a Stan Lee press conference where the mayor would present a proclamation. It's Ace Comic-Con weekend in Glendale. And Garib Shamus, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but one of the Shamus brothers that published Wizard Magazine and is now responsible for organizing Ace Comic-Con, he was there too to receive this proclamation. So when we got to the convention center and found where we were supposed to sit, it was a small room in the bowels of the Gila River Arena, and where the Coyotes play. And just a small room. It was the mayor and his assistant, a cameraman and his assistant, a couple of council people, Garib, somebody from the convention center, and us. That's it. Maybe less than 20 people. Definitely less than 20 people in the room.
Okay.
And we just sat silently, basically, and waited for Stan to arrive, as if the Pope were en route. He's 10 minutes away. He's 5 minutes away. He's down the hall. He's making his way to the room. 10 seconds. 10 seconds to Stan Lee. So he came into the room, took to the podium immediately, just walked right to the podium, asked, what am I doing here? What are we doing? And yeah, it was just a very simple kickoff, a very humble kickoff to a tremendous show.
Yeah.
And during the press conference, the mayor, Mayor Wires, extended a hand to Ken and said, Mr. Lee, this is Ken Brown. He's the co-owner and operator of Drawn to Comics, a premier small business in downtown Glendale, one of the best comic book stores in the state, if not the country, which is true because travelandleisure.com just nominated the store the 5th most desirable to visit in the country. So that's right here in the valley.
It's a gorgeous comic book store.
It's great.
And I don't know, I only got to visit there once because I live so far away from that area that I just can't wait to get back there at some point.
And explore, because you were really working the whole time.
Yeah. Because I ended up doing this 24-hour comic book challenge that you've been doing for years now.
3 years.
Not
too long compared to how long it's been around.
Right.
But I would say I have a feeling for it.
Yeah, and so this past year, you got some local comic book artists to do the challenge, and you videotaped it and interviewed us, and then you made it into a web series.
Yeah, it's on Kazbro, Kazbro Productions on YouTube. So if you find that channel, you'll find the show called Kirby for a Day.
Okay.
Starring Derk and myself as the narrator. and the Janimal, Zoe Sugg, and Bertie Bertishaw. So it's a great show. It takes place in Drawn to Comics, again nominated the 5th best comic shop to visit in the country. So the mayor introduced Ken to Stan Lee, brought Ken's family up, and they met Stan. So I was just there to take pictures, but the mayor's assistant kind of nudged me and said, "Hey, you want to get in the picture?" And I was like, I don't. And she's like, "Go ahead." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I got in the picture, and a couple of council people took my cue and kind of squeezed in on either side. So it ended up being this, 12-person picture with officials from Glendale, the Drawn to Comics founding family, Stan Lee, and me. So it was a great experience. Well, I didn't talk to Stan. I didn't shake his hand.
But the thing is that you were a part of it. And
yeah.
I think that one thing that really surprised me was that Ace Comic-Con got Stan Lee, because he had, I think, announced that he wasn't going to do any more conventions, I don't know, maybe a year ago,
Sure.
He was just kind of like, I'm kind of done with that, and then bam, I see Ace Comic-Con, and what was weird about it too is because it felt like it kind of came out of nowhere, what is this Ace Comic-Con, and I felt like they didn't really promote it as good as they could have, but then I saw the commercials and stuff. But
you saw the commercial on TV?
Yeah, I saw the commercial.
It was like a monster truck commercial, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sunday, meet Stan Lee. Chris Evans.
Yeah.
And, it was pretty crazy.
Tom Holland.
Yeah. There are really 3 kinds of Comic-Cons now. There are homespun Comic-Cons, small-town Comic-Cons, like the one our friend the Janimal organizes in Cottonwood. There are cons like Phoenix Comic-Con, which aspire to be San Diego-like in their scope. And then there are shows like San Diego, New York, and I would consider Ace, albeit this being its inaugural year. It was a tremendous show that you had to drop a significant amount of money to not only attend but enjoy the amenities of.
Right.
So if you wanted to meet Stan, Chris Evans, Tom Holland, that's hundreds of dollars.
Right.
And I think that doesn't cater to the lifelong comic book fan like you and me as much as it caters to folks that can afford it, right, and that go to those things on a whim or a lark. You know what I mean? Some of us would save for it, of course, and treasure the moment and the opportunity. But others are, bigwigs in the valley or in whatever city that show is in, that just want that opportunity to pal around with a celebrity for a few minutes and have a picture to show their friends at parties or on their phone at work or whatever. So it's an interesting phenomenon, the way comic book culture has influenced the way shows are organized. Their rising success in multimedia means these shows are a lot less about an intimate experience with an artist over the table and much more about the tribe of standing in line with other fans of this mainstream thing, seeing the celebrity for a few minutes and just having that story that's unique to you. Well, I said this and he laughed, or I referenced this and he nodded knowingly. You know what I mean? Those are really the stories people are developing coming out of Comic-Cons, not I got this signed, I got that signed. So it's just different, and that's what Ace was all about. I'm not disparaging it at all. I think it's a cool thing if you're into that. Being in the same room as Stan Lee was awesome, and kind of all I needed from it. I heard now you go to meet Stan Lee, you're not going to have a meaningful conversation with him, unfortunately. You're going to be one of dozens, if not hundreds, that have also paid for that opportunity and that are herded through.
But I feel like you had an even more intimate moment with him, since that you were a part of this this award that was being given to him. So
yeah, a proclamation from the mayor. It was kind of cheesily written, but Mayor Wires was awesome about it, delivered it well. He said other cities will be Hulk green with envy as we host Ace Comic-Con, and comics will spin a Spider-Man web around the city this week. And so it was that kind of hokey, written for him kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's Stan Lee.
Yeah, but it was fun.
And I'm sure that he thought that was cute in some way. And
a couple nights later, I met again our friend Jan in the lobby of the Renaissance Hotel for a drink. He said, "What do you want to do after dinner?" I said, "You know what? Let's just go hang out at the hotel next to the convention center and see who walks in." because these guys are probably staying there, courtesy the con, and let's just see if somebody grabs a drink in the lobby. So we're sitting there shooting the breeze, and in walks Bob Layton, legendary Iron Man artist, among many other things. Got a picture with Bob Layton. And again, I hadn't gone into the show, and if you were to give me a short list of artists I would have wanted to meet there, if I had to make one, it would have been Bob Layton, of course, legendary, Stan Lee, Mike Zeck, who swung by Drawn to Comics shortly after he landed in the Valley, had a great conversation with Ken and me. We took him out to dinner. This is the guy that designed the black-suited Spider-Man.
Right, and I kind of wanted to touch upon that real quick, because one of the graphic novels that we had to read in my screenwriting comic book class was the Secret Wars.
Oh,
and that was, of course, that was the first time that you see the black suit.
Yeah.
And I know that he was one of the writers with Secret Wars, because it was like this huge thing for Marvel at that time, and it was surprising that, like, when I looked, did some research on it, that it originally was just an idea to sell toys.
Right.
And so they didn't know how popular the comic book series was going to be, and they didn't even realize, like, what they were doing was, like, merging all of these different stories together, and like it became this big event for comic books.
Changed comics forever, because from that you get DC's Crisis, which then inspires every universe-wide crossover that's happened since.
Right.
And it just began as a marketing idea to sell some toys. Mattel has this Masters of the Universe thing. They're selling action figures via a cartoon and comic books enclosed with the toys. Let's do something similar.
There's this Netflix series that just started up.
I've watched it.
Oh, The Toys That Made Us?
Yep.
Yeah. I watched just the Masters of the Universe episode, just because, like, those toys meant so much to me when I was a little kid.
Me too.
And so I was just like, man, I got to see how that all played out. And that was a really fun episode.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
But I love just shooting the shit with you. But let's get down to business.
Let's get down to business. I will say this, though. Everything we just talked about ties into the theme of your show, because, again, Mr. Zeck designed an alternate suit for Spider-Man so we could sell another action figure. And then before you know it, it is this timeless concept of the black suit, which becomes Venom, which will soon be featured in another movie starring Tom Hardy. So, I mean, that's just the germ of an idea that grew into something crazy. So that's the concept of your show, a germ of an idea, and we will water it, and 20 years from now, that will be our proverbial Spider-Man's black suit. You know what I'm saying? It will grow like a symbiote, consuming culture.
Well, I'm glad you just summed up everything for me. I didn't even know where this was going. I was just like, man, we're already like 15 minutes into this, and we haven't pitched anything. We're just going to get right into it.
Let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. So, what did you come here to pitch?
Well, I have a story that's been in the back of my mind for nigh on 20 years. Now, it was an idea I had in the early 2000s when my friend Brent and I were self-publishing comics. I lived in Southern California. We self-published a title called The Successors, which was a superhero book, standard superhero stuff. Actually ended up being a lot like a certain television show that came on shortly after that called Heroes. There were some remarkable similarities between our comic book and that TV show. So we exhibited at San Diego Comic-Con and the Alternative Press Expo, and it was there at APE that we saw a lot of indie books and alt-press comics that weren't superhero related. They were just slice-of-life stories. I mean, that's popular stuff if you're into that kind of thing, and it's been around for a long time, since the days of Harvey Pekar and even before that. But I thought, we need to have an exciting slice-of-life story in our repertoire. So if somebody's not into superheroes, they could look at this book. So I developed an idea that we never completed. I don't think Brent drew any concept art for it, but it was just one of those stories we'd banter back and forth about over coffee or while we were working on the successors or something like that. It's called Fallapart, and that's how I pronounce it. I don't, in my mind, the cadence isn't fall apart, it's fall apart, like it's one word. And the story is in a single sentence about a man that has everything and finds his own body dwindling to nothing. That's the one sentence pitch. Now here's the general concept. This guy, and we'll call him Leonard, I think that was his name. I had some crazy name that paralleled to a play on the word leprosy. So I don't like Leonard Parse or something like that. So it was like Leo, something stupid. But Leonard wakes up one morning in his beautiful high-rise loft, however the better half lives. He wakes up in the morning and he is completely bald. His hair has fallen out. He's laying on a pillow of his own luxurious hair.
Wow.
And he's shocked and stunned, obviously. He goes to the mirror. He can't believe it. You know, like anything, the hair was a prideful reflection of his success and hubris and ego and status. So he throws on a cap and he's got to go to work. He's the CEO of some company that was never really fully developed. Just he was a hot shot.
Right.
And in 2001, 2, 3, when I was creating this story, social media was... Did it even exist? I don't know. But I guess you could say this guy is a mogul in that regard. Something progressive, something that's still developing.
Right.
Something where you would know his name, like a Wozniak or who's the Facebook guy? That guy.
Yeah, that guy.
You know, a Tom from MySpace, if we're talking about the early 2000s. You know his face, you know his name. He's walking down the street and there's some paparazzi and that kind of thing. So... You know, he hustles to work, gets to the office, secretary gives him his notes, you know, cancel my appointments, yada, yada. In a moment of panic, he slams his briefcase down on his wrist, and his hand pops off.
Jeez.
Now, this isn't a bloody thing. He's coming apart as if he were made of clay.
Yeah.
So you're not seeing a bloody stump. It's just a sheer cut, and then the severance, whatever you would call that, is pink and purple like flesh. Wow. So it's really bizarre. But he's falling apart, and so consequently, so is his mental stability and any concept of self he has, because he's so dependent on his good looks and how that communicates to other people and contributes to his financial success and well-being and status as a celebrity. There may have been a time in the development of the story where he was an actor, you know, really dependent on those looks, but I thought that was too easy. You know, I want the commentary on this to be a little more than celebrity. It's how we perceive ourselves. Mm-hmm. You know, we've all felt like our lives are falling apart. There's a stage. We all go through a stage, and whether it's something we make up in adolescence and it's melodramatic and this too shall pass, or whether it's a real thing like the passing of a loved one or the loss of a job or needing to relocate. You know, we've all experienced these transitions where it's like my life is falling apart. Everything I know is coming undone. And will I ever be able to put this back together or create something new that's as stable as this thing? So his hand is in a briefcase, and he hurriedly runs into the street, flees the office, maybe to go visit a doctor friend, a plastic surgeon, somebody he knows that could help. Somebody runs by and steals the briefcase with his hand inside. So he's chasing this guy. It's a foot chase. You know, hits his head on something, his eyeball pops out. And it's comical, but dark, too, because he is falling apart. And, you know, he lets the eyeball go because the hand's the bigger deal. He's going after the hand. You know, he's got this moment where it's like,
I can get a glass eye,
yeah.
You know?
They can replace that, but can they replace that? You know, he's going through these, you know, so he's chasing the guy, the mugger, whoever. And, you know, I lived in Southern California at the time. So in my mind, this foot chase ended like in an area that's like the Santa Monica Pier, kind of a circus or festival atmosphere.
Okay.
The guy gets away. Leonard either passes out or is knocked out or something like that, wakes up in a circus. Appropriately, now he has become a fixture in the circus.
And part of the freak show.
Part of the freak show. It's a big jump in the story, but these were just scenes I was, concocting.
Okay.
I'm sure there would be more to it. We'd see that he maybe had a family at one point that he, neglected or abandoned for the sake of his career and fame. Didn't have a lot of personal friends. The secretary that brought him the notes maybe was the closest person in his life, only because she kept it together for him. Now his life's fallen apart. He can't go back there to get her help. Here he is in this circus, and there's a moment where he thinks, this is it. This is where this ends. I'm falling apart. I'm a freak. No eye, no hand. I think there was a joke at one point with a patch and a hook hand, and he's kind of like a pirate, and it's like, geez, man, come see the real pirate kind of a thing, alongside the bearded lady and the extra tall man or whatever. And
I know that he's a part of the freak show, but how do they prove that he's this man falling apart? Would that be a part of the show that takes place? Is that
sure? Come watch a part of him fall off.
Yeah, let me watch us break off another piece of him.
Sure. I hadn't thought that much about it, but absolutely.
Because it's just you have to kind of prove that this guy is so. It's kind of like this Mr. Glass character.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing is, everything had been happening, I don't want to say naturally or organically, because those are weird words to use, but he wasn't pulling something off. Stuff was falling off.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be a great scene where the ringmaster says, watch the man that falls apart, nothing happens, so somebody comes up to him with a knife or something, and he's like, whoa, this, look at the stump, everything's clean, you can't cut something off, I am falling apart,
Yeah.
But in the circus, he catches wind of a newspaper. He sees a newspaper, something online, I guess, nowadays. And he's accused of murder because his fingerprints were found at the scene. And he realizes somebody is using my hand. The guy that took my briefcase, it had my hand in there. He's using my prints to peg me for this murder. So he has to leave the circus, get back into the world, and clear his name. And maybe that's why this is happening in the first place, so they can use him. That's really as far as I got in the story.
But that's interesting, too. That's this whole new chapter in the story.
Sure.
That in a sense, he's falling apart as well with this... the notoriety that he had, and now it's in shambles because of someone's framing him for whatever that they're trying to get out of it.
Sure. So it changes from his body is falling apart to now his reputation is falling apart.
Right.
And
that's what I'm trying to get at.
There's a great. Today's news is a great example of that. We were talking about Stan Lee in the last episode, and days before I was in the day I was in the same room as him, he is now on this list of male celebrities and producers and bigwigs that have been accused of sexual misconduct.
Uh-huh.
Stan Lee's 95 years old.
Yeah.
With a relatively clean reputation. Some may say he didn't really create those characters. That was all Jack and Ditko and this and that. But that's hardly sexual misconduct. That you know what I mean? That doesn't affect somebody's character in that way.
Right.
So it's a similar thing now where this story would have that kind of relevance. How easy is it to dismantle a person's reputation in the community, in their industry, etc., with but a use of their hand? If these guys were using their hands inappropriately, in this story, somebody uses Leonard's hand inappropriately, in this case to put a print on a murder scene, and the poignancy to that is there. He's innocent. What he's guilty of is hubris and neglect of a personal life, almost like a Scrooge in that way. But he's still famous, and we don't know how many of these celebrities that are either on that list or not don't have personal lives. I mean, what's Kanye doing when the cameras aren't on him? Is he just at home watching TV, watching Netflix or whatever, like the rest of us? Or is it a tireless pursuit for image and ego and feeling important? Is that a life fulfilled, or is it one that can easily fall apart? And that's the idea.
And I think that how he physically starts to fall apart, and that leads him to the circus. I think that in a sense it's like a humbling experience. Now he's to the point where he's not the big head honcho.
Right.
He's just one of the many employees that make up this circus, and that he has this smaller purpose.
Sure.
In the with everyone else, and I think that maybe that allows him to be a bit more grounded and to be a bit more helpless, and then taking on friends
Sure.
of the circus, other freaks, and how maybe that they can help him solve this problem later on.
Yeah.
And I think that you have circus characters and stuff like that are so interesting just visually.
Sure.
But you could get into what brought them to this place as well, and how will they help him solve this mystery of almost who are these murderers, and
right.
or a murderer, and why is he blackmailing him, and why?
Yeah. What is this universal conspiracy against him that he's falling apart? Number one, physically. Then number two, this crazy thing happens. Did that guy that swiped his briefcase know his hand would be inside?
Did he know that this was going to happen?
Right.
This.
And the thing about the circus scene or scenes, and now that the story is kind of coming back to me as we discuss, I think some of those characters, we're going to tag along and try to help solve the murder. But those characters, those freaks, are happy, seemingly normal people outside of being the smallest woman in the world, or the bearded woman, or the wolf boy, or whatever. They're physically, quote unquote, grotesque or different, but they're happy to come to work. And the scene that would have really brought it home was, the show's over. He is basically going to crash in some hay because he's got nowhere else to go, and everybody else is packing up, and he's like, "Where are you guys going?" They're like, "We're going home. I have a wife, I have children, I have a roommate, I have a house." And he's like, "You guys don't live here at the circus?" He's like, and they'd be like, "No, we have friends and family and lives and stuff." And so it really hits home that they have this camaraderie with each other and are happy at work, but then they clock out, despite the way they look, go home. Mm-hmm. And he's just alone in the stables, and he didn't think that would be a part of this new chapter in his life. So
it might be better because that maybe since he was framed and everything like that, that's why he joined the circus in a sense. Because you're also how did he get there? He was imprisoned. There's it feels like now that's just a problem all in itself.
Sure.
Maybe he chose this way of life.
Yeah, the headline, he could read the headline before finding the circus.
Right.
And then, see a poster or something and realize, I got to get out of town. I still got to live. Maybe I got to join these freaks and get out of here. And now he's a part of this traveling circus that, again, is made up of weird looking people, but they're regular acting people. They act like normal people.
And maybe that's something that he comes to a realization, is that the reason why he joined the circus is because he felt like he was this freak.
Sure.
And that he's falling apart, and because of that problem that he has, he feels like the only place that he can go to feel normal is the circus.
Right.
And then realizing that, that my life can be more than that, and having this group of characters help him get back to the way he originally was, by figuring out who this murderer is and why he's framing him. That's what needs to be resolved.
Sure. He could be on the road and then kind of loosely following, quote unquote, his case.
Right.
And then, because of the things that might be falling off, like maybe his nose falls off or something, he would be unrecognizable as the man they're looking for.
Right.
So he could kind of investigate. But maybe he could, see something in the paper that's like they're interrogating his ex-wife and his son or something like that. And he's like, all right, I didn't think about them as far as they'd be getting shaken down.
Right.
By the police, by the media. It's not just my reputation, it's anybody that was connected to me. We got to go back and solve this thing. So, the wolf boy and the bearded woman come with him back to the city, so to speak. And he's the Joseph Campbell hero at that point. He's traveled, learned some lessons, now he's coming home. And then that third act could be solving the murder. And I always thought that it would be this weird twist, not quite M. Night style, but he'd solve the murder, and it has no connection to what's happening to him. It would just be a circumstance where the guy went home, popped open the briefcase, hoping for cash, finds a hand, and then brings that along on capers. The next thing you know, something goes wrong, and he ends up shooting the guy. The mugger shoots the guy he was trying to rob, freaks out, realizes he has the hand, puts those prints everywhere. Now he gets away scot-free. So Leonard figures all that out and tracks this guy down. And, maybe in the throes of the encounter, what's happening to me? Why am I falling apart? And the guy's like, I have no idea. What are you talking about? I have no idea what's happening to you. And so that creates not the end of the story, but maybe just the end of the second act, where it's like, I thought I'd find resolution here, and maybe I've cleared my name, but that doesn't mean I'm still not falling apart,
And I haven't solved the problem of reversing.
Right. Yeah, stopping it or reversing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have an idea at the time of what was happening to him, and it's absurdly simple. When you hear it, that's why I was never satisfied with it, because it just seemed like a gimme, and it would basically be the secretary snipping pieces off of a voodoo doll. So super simple, in my opinion. Maybe that's because I'm so close to the story that seems like an easy end. But, he would eventually go back to the secretary just to maybe get something or to let her know, thinking maybe she's so concerned for me or something, I should go check in and let her know I'm okay. And instead, there she is in charge of the company, scissors on his foot as he's walking through the door. She snips it, the foot falls off, he falls to his knee, and it clicks like, oh my God. And then the thing that the story was going to end with her cutting off his head and pulling the button eye off and putting that in like a jar or something on the counter, so he would have to watch her live a more fulfilled life than he ever did. So it was going to have this the story was meant to be relatively comedic along the way, because he is literally falling apart. There'd be multiple scenes where he's checking his pants and be like, okay, good, it's still there. Like maybe at the circus the bearded lady is down, and he's like, wait a minute, and he checks his pants. He's like, all right, maybe we shouldn't do this, because I'd hate for this thing to fall off. I don't want that to fall apart. But then, it was going to end with he learns this lesson and is relatively okay with the way things are going, and maybe the falling apart is happening less and less. And that would speak to the fact that the person responsible for it needs him to fall apart less and less. Whatever vengeance plot it was or lesson they wanted to teach him is waning as time goes by. So it'd be one of those tropes where, like in The Walking Dead, for example, which wasn't out then, but it starts with a zombie-heavy invasion, and then as the story develops... pause right here.
We've got visitors. Our dogs are home.
The dogs are home.
All right.
The podcast is falling apart. Well, you could edit, though, right?
Yeah, I can edit.
Okay. Yeah, I paused right there.
So, Deshaun, could you give them another, just real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I gotta leave soon. Anyway.
Yeah, we're already at 7.
Okay.
So, just real quick lap. Thanks, Deshaun.
So here, I'll jump right back in. You can edit it together.
Okay, yeah.
So it would be like The Walking Dead, or a story that kind of hinges on a particular concept, but then utilizes it more as a tapestry to evolve character. So like, The Walking Dead starts, and it's zombies everywhere, and a horror story. But as the seasons progressed on the show and the comics told more of the story, it's much more a character piece than it is a zombie thriller. That's just the world these interesting people,
right,
like Negan and Rick live in. Mm-hmm. So that's what the story would be like. Leonard's falling apart, and it's shocking and grotesque at first, but as the story continues, you see less and less of that and learn more about him and the people he's encountering as a result, and what his life might have been like before to contrast where he is now, these lessons he's learning, and so on. And then at the end, it's really less about the falling apart and more about how he's keeping it together. And but then you get that shock at the end where, it was meant to be a finite story, not something that can continue, because there are only so many parts of him that could fall off before it's just a head.
And I would think that at that point it's going to accelerate, because she's realized that he's figuring it out.
Right.
That,
yeah.
Well,
and you could have that moment where he comes into the office and there she is, and he's approaching her, and she's just snipping off more and more pieces until finally she gets the head and it just rolls toward her and it's over for him.
Right.
But she puts that, like I said, in a jar or something, and his fate is to watch this life, proverbially, if not literally. I don't know if the eye is conscious in recording things, but the viewer, the reader, however the story would be told, I always thought it would be interesting to have the last panel with her and a family at a fireplace like at Christmas time, and that's reflected in the jar, and you see the eyeball floating, so you know that he has to watch this thing.
I kind of like it, man, because I like the voodoo aspect of it as well, because I think that kind of makes it realistic, where like well, it's not realistic, but
understandable. It makes it understandable,
because I think that also too, that since people the zombie craze is so popular, that this is a new take on zombies, in a sense, that
interesting,
like that maybe he didn't know that he was undead, like at one point, like maybe she did kill him, and that now he's undead, and she has control over his body, this voodoo doll, that where she can like snip off parts, and that he's literally falling apart, but not because of decomposing, but it's because she's in complete control of his physical existence,
right?
And
well, and when you put it that way too, she was in control of his life before he was. So there would be scenes at the beginning where you'd see how dependent he is on her keeping the books, the schedule,
and then it could there could be like this like deeper story behind her, and maybe like she worked up the ladder to be the secretary to take revenge on him, like maybe he had wronged her or the family, and he just didn't realize it, that originally that's where this revenge.
Sure. At one point, again, it's interesting because when you're so close to a concept or a story, you start to wonder how much of this is obvious to a reader. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be clever, like with a voodoo thing, but, in the first act when it starts happening, would somebody say, oh, somebody has a voodoo doll of him? Like, I don't know that.
Right.
So
I don't even know if someone would realize that, like, yeah, maybe he's a zombie or something like that.
Sure. I had ideas where the secretary and the ex-wife end up being that happy family he has to watch. So they're together, and in 2002, that was a daring idea. But nowadays, it would almost be like its own Netflix series. But that was the idea, was that, he had neglected the family, and she did the sending of the flowers on the anniversary, and blah, blah, blah. So now she's taken over his role completely.
Kind of reminds me of the Scrooged, Bill Murray.
Yes, yeah, a lot of that, and that might be close to the tone I wanted. You know, where it would be darkly funny at times, but also you grow to sympathize who he's becoming, the better character. And so as things are happening to him before, it's funny, and you have no sympathy, but now it's like, geez, man, he's learned lessons. Why is this still happening to him? You know? And ultimately, the allegory is how easily could that happen to any of us, whether it's the consequence of things we've done or circumstances of the universe. How far are we from falling apart, and what would we do to hold it together? Boom! That would be the end of my pitch me. The pitch meeting is over. I want you producers to think about that.
No, that's great, man. I think that's a great way to end it, this episode, and it makes me want to think more about it. So cool. I think that this is a story that, it does reflect on like several different issues that like people have in their lives, and but then also has this fictional aspect to it. Well, wherever you go with that, that's up to you. But but I've always liked that the origin of zombies came from voodoo. So,
well, there you go. I was writing The Walking Dead long before you, Kirkman.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. Thanks again for being on the show again.
Sure, no, it's my pleasure. People could follow me on Instagram at AmazingAZComics, AmazingAZComics, and that's where you can see pictures of Stan Lee, like we talked about last episode, or the comic I'm currently working on, the latest issue of Amazing Arizona Comics, and I'll post when Ken Brown from Drawn to Comics and I publish our next podcast. I'm doing a lot a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's why you're so busy. Phoenix Tonight.
Yes, my live local late night talk show. Yeah. Sure, and a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're one of the guys locally that I look up to.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man.
I'm glad that you're on my little show that I do.
This is a great idea for a podcast because, again, we all have these stories, and your guests can include folks that aren't even doing creative things now. They've just always had an idea for something.
Mm-hmm. I think, and I think that's where anybody can be a part of it. You don't have to. You don't have to be a writer. You don't have to be a comic book artist. Like, everybody has stories in their heads, and it's just it's nice to like just share it with people, and,
sure.
and not feel, I don't know, embarrassed to say it. Just let it out and
right.
and see where it goes. Maybe like it'll spark other ideas that like you never thought you had.
Right.
And I'm here to help you.
That's great. You're an enabler, dude.
Just trying to get you to be creative.
Sure. Cool.
So, all right. Well, I think that's the end of the fourth episode of Here Comes the Pitch. Thanks again, man.
Thanks.
All right.